sick.
Oh, yeah, buddy.
The high alpine trails of Park City, Utah proved the perfect testing ground for the Ibis Mojo HD5. The 5th generation of the Mojo, of course, brought us new, more aggressive geometry, but also it introduced Ibis's extra light traction tune to the already dialed DW Link suspension.
So I think what's one of the really cool things about the new HD5 is that it's running like lighter tune suspension, like rebound and compression, than has kind of been made before. They got Fox to make specially designed, faster rebounding, like faster compressing forks to try to like get the shaft speeds higher, because it's kind of their feeling like, you know, faster means better. When you're going faster, it hugs the ground better, right? And I think that's a really cool story in this bike.
I was really pleasantly surprised by this bike. A lot of times I'm a little bit smaller than you guys, and a lot of times when it comes to bigger suspension bikes, and again, this one is 153 millimeters in the rear travel, 170 millimeter fork, which is definitely on the big side for me. This so far has been the favorite bike I've ridden, and I was really, really surprised. I didn't feel overwhelmed by it at all. I felt great, and I got to ride this one both on our long travel course, but then it was riding so well, I went ahead and took it over to our short travel course and did a fair bit of rooty climbing on it and put down one of my fastest times, which really blew me away.
That's where I think the light tune works especially well with DW Link. I mean, I feel like the Ripmo is where we first coined our now overused phrase of hover bike. But when you add that light tune, the DW Link is still doing its thing. It's still hovering along. It's still not listening to what the pedals are doing. It's just listening to what the ground's doing.
It doesn't rely on a low-speed compression tune in the shock in order to get to pedal well, right? It's already doing that. So it enables them to lighten it up, which enables it to react to the ground better, right?
And I definitely found that because I've been on some of the other bikes, the Enduro for one, where it was a little bit tricky getting the rebound fast enough. And this one wasn't a problem at all, and definitely felt that traction on both the rooty climbs, but also got to find it on, you know, there's one of the big rock garden that was on our long travel loop. You know, it lets you dance your way through it, and this was one of the ones where I got through it without even thinking about it.
The other thing that like the really light damping does, and for me it was kind of a negative, is like on slow techie climbing, it feels more pogo sticky, right? Like high speed damping works really well at high speeds. When you're traveling at high speeds, when you're like when you're kind of just like going slowly up a technical climb, it does feel like that more pogo sticky thing, and that's kind of when I want to slow the rebound down a bit. But then it delivers what I want on the descent, you know. So there is a bit of a trade-off with that, but this does give you the range in adjustment to be able to kind of like get used to it and find your settings, you know.
With the improved traction that comes with that faster rebound and compression tune, the HD5 seemed to roll over obstacles like a 29er, while still cornering like a 27.5.
This approach, for people who aren't ready to wholesale dive into, I'll never ride anything smaller than 29, this is a way to get a good amount of that small bump sensitivity. And I say a good amount. I'm not gonna say all of that. I'm not gonna get rid of my 29. Yeah.
But it's funny because when I was riding it, it actually reminded me more. I was like, this kind of feels like the rollover of a 2.9, you know? Like, I actually got the opportunity to ride this at home, and I had the opportunity to ride it with like the old tune suspension and the new stuff. And when I went from the old one, it just felt like a regular old, you know, small wheel bike. It's like, doesn't have the same kind of cornering traction, not the same rollover. The wheels are kind of like getting caught up in stuff, right? And then when we switched it over to the new tune, it was just like flying over everything. It wasn't getting hung up on anything at all. And I was like, immediately I was like, this kind of feels like a big wheel bike now. But it still has that nice like playful maneuverability. You can dance around with it. And then what I really like about it as well is like that, like running the rebound really fast. Like you can kind of just dip into the suspension whenever you want to, and pop and hop. And like if there's a you know, down tree right in front of you, you like cross a corner and there's a down tree and you're like, ah! You can just like hop it up off the ground so quickly. I feel like it reacts really well, you know?
And I definitely found that as well. I tend to ride almost only 29ers. I didn't expect to like this bike as much as I did, and again, even though the term is absolutely overused, this bike really was playful.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that part of it. I actually was looking at it in comparison to some of the other bikes I've been riding, expecting it to have a much shorter wheelbase.
Yeah.
And the small that I was on, I think I had an 1184 wheelbase, which was actually longer than some of the others that I've ridden.
So when I was playing with it in the way that you guys are, my first run, I kind of ignored their whole traction tune philosophy, and I set it up to feel the way I think a normal bike should feel.
Yeah, or how you're used to it feeling
Yeah,
or something,
yeah,
right?
yeah. And the good news is that really within reason you can. Like if you're a bigger guy like me and you like what the HD5 offers, but you aren't necessarily totally on board with this, at least on your first ride, you can make it feel a little more traditional. And I, after doing 2 runs on it, because I did another run as well, also on the less aggressive course, so I can get a little more gnarly traily climbing and all that, and I found that it spoke a little better to me and my style in that more traditional tune.
Yeah, and that kind of brings up 2 things for me. Like, first is that really, like, you know, what this does is it enables you to run your stuff faster, right? It's a lighter tune that's been done before, but you still have the adjustments on the fork. Like you can shut them down if you want to. It just kind of like makes a more usable range for a lot of people, because I think a lot of people can agree that, like, you know, especially with compression damping, a lot of people tend to run that stuff pretty wide open, you know, to get the forks to feel nice and soft and, like, you know, plush and stuff.
So I felt like this bike cornered really, really well. And again, I think for me, I really recognize being smaller. Again, I feel like that's where I could feel that rebound coming into play, so I could really push in the corners and come out of it. I also really like that there's enough clearance for a 2.6. We're not going crazy. This isn't the age of the 27.5 where you want to put a 3-inch tire in there. But I tend to, lately I've been running 2.6s on things, so I like the fact that I still have that option with this bike.
Yeah, Ibis was one of the first companies to kind of like really adopt the wider rim, bigger tire philosophy.
Right. Because the bikes come with a 35mm rim on it, or at least the build that I rode did.
Speaking of builds, like there's an NX version of this bike, full carbon Ibis for $4,400. I mean, you compromise here and there, I think, especially on the brakes.
The brakes.
But there's an SLX one for $5,200.
Yeah, that's a steal. That's a really, and SLX components are going to be durable. Like, you know that it's going to shift well. You know that it's going to perform. You know.
One thing I would change on this bike, I want to try it with the 29-inch front wheel. I don't know if you're supposed to.
You're not, so I checked the website.
Yeah.
This bike is not designed to be mulleted, much to
really?
your
Yeah?
disappointment.
Okay, well, if you don't tell them, I won't tell them.
So, Ibis found a new way to breathe new life into the 27.5 platform. It's still a classic little-wheeled brawler, sure to keep diehards happy. But if you're on the fence, it's the perfect machine to bring you over to the dark side. To read the full review and to see more from the 2020 Bible of Bike Tests, visit bikemag.com.